Okay, I'm happy to. Should we make a start? Okay, yeah. So, okay, good evening. Thank you for joining. So I thought it would be nice to just bring a little historical perspective before we begin on Tu B'Shvat in this account, this lovely account from Tu B'Shvat in early 20th century Lithuania. Did you get the sources that I sent around? So it's just a really sort of lovely idea of what Tu B'Shvat meant. Everything about Shvat seems to be contained within Tu B'Shvat. They talk about this joy of what Tu B'Shvat was. The cheder, every student would bring carob, raisins, almonds, other fruits. The teacher would pile into one great heap, then begin to hand out to the children. Rich and poor, everyone received an equal share. The teacher would pronounce the blessings upon each variety. Everyone would repeat their brachas in this singing voice. And then they had this Frida the Bean woman would appear with her two great, huge baskets. I think it's just and she said to them, and you see how tied up Tu B'Shvat was with that love for Eretz Yisrael. She said, as I'm telling you the truth, these carobs grew in Eretz Yisrael, and I want to live to be able to see the place where they would grow. And they envied the goats. It finishes off how they envied the goats of the land of Israel. It's just a lovely and beautiful account to really, I think that it just demonstrates for us how important symbolically Tu B'Shvat is and has been for Jews throughout history. One of the reasons why that's the case, because really ostensibly, it seems strange why. The reality is that Tu B'Shvat has very, very specific significance, halachic significance. It's something which is, as we'll see in a minute, it's got very specific halachic significance that's to do with taking the Maisa, the tithes. Why is it, what is it about Tu B'Shvat that has become something so much greater than that? And although this is a shiur which is, focused on the month of Shvat as a whole, I think what we can do is, from understanding the essence of Tu B'Shvat, we can really understand the message of the month as a whole, the message of Shvat. What is the message of this month? And I think it's all contained within the ideas surrounding Tu B'Shvat. So let's try and understand first of all what exactly Tu B'Shvat is. So you have a Mishnah. The Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah tells us that there are Arba Rosh Hashanim. There are 4 heads of the year. There are 4 Rosh Hashanahs. This is the first Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah, and it goes to each one. We don't have to spend too much time on the others for now. The first of Nisan is Rosh Hashanah in terms of counting the years of kings. It's Rosh Hashanah of the Yomim Tovim. The first of Elul is Rosh Hashanah in terms of the way you calculate Maisa Behema, the tithes that are taken from the animals. Rabbi and Shimon, they say that's Echad B'Tishri. First of Tishri is Rosh Hashanah for years, Shemitah, Yovel, and other applications as well. Natia, planting, rockers, vegetables. Be'echad B'Shvat, and then you have a machlokas, a debate between Hillel and Shammai. Be'echad B'Shvat is Rosh Hashanah le'Elon. Divrei Beis Shammai. Shammai say that the first of Shvat is Rosh Hashanah for the trees. Beis Hillel Omer Yisrael say b'chamisha osobai is on the 15th of Shvat, the 15th of Shvat. So here you have a you have first. It's interesting itself that there is a debate on this. This is the only one where there's a debate. Sorry, earlier as well. But there is obviously a dispute here as to what exactly when this Rosh Hashanah is. And obviously the question is, why do the trees need a Rosh Hashanah at all? As I said, the basic simple reason is because it refers to the calculation of Maisa. So when you can't take Maisa, the 10th tithe, which is given to the Levium, you can't take that from fruits which have budded in one year on that and those which bud in the next year. And the cutoff date is simply either, according to Beis Shammai, the 1st of Shvat, according to Beis Hillel, it's the 15th of Shvat. That means a tree which buds before Shvat, you cannot take the Maisa on that which buds after Shvat. You go after the budding of the fruit. It's the main reason. There are other issues as well to do with the Shemitah year as well, the Shemitah cycle. Sorry. We talk about when you have to, there's a difference in the 7-year cycle as to whether the correct application is Maisa Oni, which is the tithe which is given to the poor. That's given in the 3rd and 6th years. If the fruit budded before the Tu B'Shvat of the third year, so up to that point in Shvat, then that's considered to be the fruit of the second year, and you'd have to take Ma'aser Sheni, the second tithe, which is taken to Yerushalayim. But if it buds after that date, then if it's now considered to be the third year, and therefore you take Ma'aser Oni instead, the tithe that is given to the poor. So that's the technical reason to B'Shvat. Now, clearly, that still would leave us with a real question as to why it is that it has taken on such symbolic significance. You don't find the same with the first of Elul being significant in the sense of Ma'aser Behema. We find that we when it comes to the tithes, the tenth is taken from the animals. You don't find that we attribute any if you like significance to Rosh Chodesh Elul because of that. We certainly contribute significance to Rosh Chodesh Elul because of the upcoming Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. What is it about Shevat that has this significance? So the second source is a Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, Daf Yud Daled. The Gemara explains like this: on the first of Shvat, says the Gemara, Be'echad b'Shvat, on the first of Shvat, Rosh Hashanah le'ilon, is Rosh Hashanah for the trees. My timer, what's the reason? Why is that significant? Again, following Beis Shammai's view, Beis Shammai held that today is, of course, Rosh Chodesh, the first of Shvat. He says that's the day. Rabbi Loza, Rabbi Yoshia. The reason he says is, Rabbi Loza says in the name of Rabbi Yoshia, Hoil v'yotzu rov gishmei shana, because the majority of the rainfall of the year has already passed by this point. Va'adayin rov tekufa mebachutz. Tekufa refers to the cycle of the year, and specifically here it means the winter tekufa. The year is divided into four periods known as the equinox. Each one has the midpoint, I think, which is the equinox. But the year is divided into four seasons, basically: spring, summer, autumn, and winter. These have particular halachic relevance in a number of ways. This phrase "Va'adayin rov tekufa mibachutz" means the majority of the rains have passed, but the major portion of the winter cycle, is still ahead. So the majority of the period which we call winter is still yet to come. The Gemara says, Maikam, what does that mean? The Gemara explains clearly what this means. Hachikam is what it's saying. Even though the majority of the winter season is still ahead of us, since the majority of the rainy season has already passed, that is why this is considered to be the beginning of the new year in terms of the life of trees, and therefore the halachic implications that has in terms of taking Ma'aser. So what you see from here is something very, very fascinating, because we're saying the Gemara is itself, if you like, admitting that really Tu B'Shvat, right, is effectively in the wrong place. Okay, even more so according to Beis Shammai, who hold it's on the first of Shvat. But even if you say it's the 15th of Shvat, it's still right in the depths of winter. It's still right there in the depths of winter. The Meiri, who's one of the classic early commentators on the Gemara, explains this a little bit more. He says, what do Beis Hillel hold? So that's the next source. So Beis Hillel say, B'chamisha Osobo, on the 15th day, Shenimshechu mit Teves ad Chatzi Shvat Shisha Shavuos. From the month of Teves until the halfway through Shvat, there are 6 weeks. Shem Chatzi Yemei Tukufas Teves. That's the winter season we call the Tukufa of Teves. And that draws, that goes right to Nisan. That's the midpoint, right? You take the month of Teves and half of Shvat, and that's halfway, right? Halfway between those 3 months, and the other half of Shvat and the month of Adar, and that gets you to Nisan. The strength is already waning a little bit. He says that the strength of the cold is not so strong. It's already getting slightly warm. I'm not sure anyone has noticed that, but that's what he says. It's already getting slightly warmer in some way. And the budding of the trees begins to get stronger from this point onwards. But you'll agree, I think, that it's very, very subtle. To have to go, if you go outside most years and you search for signs of spring around Tu B'Shvat, you're going to have to search pretty hard. It's not easy to find. There's no question that the signs of spring are really hardly there at all. at this stage. So what we have to say is that there is something about Tu B'Shvat which tells us, which appears specifically, there seems to be a need to focus on spring right in the depths of winter, either at the midpoint of that winter season, or according to Beis Shammai, even earlier. There must be something about needing to focus, and the lesson that has for us in focusing on spring, specifically in the depths of winter. And it seems to be that it is that which not only, if you like, epitomizes what this month is meant to teach us, but also the message for life as a whole in terms of focusing in general, in terms of focusing on spring, even in the depths of winter. And that's what I'd like to explain this evening, based on some incredibly profound ideas and thoughts from Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, who has a number of essays on this theme, trying to combine some ideas to bring out some I think fascinating points. The first question, if you like, and please do stop me if anything's unclear, obviously, at any stage. First question is, what do we mean by the word choref? So choref is winter. We translate choref as winter, right? What does that word mean? Where does it come from? So probably the first instance that it appears in the Torah, source 4, right? In Parshas Noach, yeah? Parshas Noach is after the Mabul, after the flood. So Noach is promised by Hashem that the seasons will remain fixed. As part of the promise, there won't be another flood. There will be these fixed seasons to the year. Hashem says, Od kol yomei ha'aretz, zera v'kotze v'kar v'choim. There will be the various seasons of the year, the times for sowing, the times for harvesting, the cold and the hot, v'kayetz v'choref, the kayetz, which we translate now as the summer and the winter, v'yom v'layla lo yishbosim, day and night they will not cease. All these seasons, Hashem promises, will remain fixed forevermore. They won't cease as they did during the time of the flood. Now, although we translate choref as winter, the original meaning of that word, as Rashi tells us here, right at the bottom of the first page, he says choref is eis zera soirim. It's the time of the sowing of the barley, the kitniot, and the kitnios, right? So the kitnios are legumes, right? Like we're familiar with from Pesach. Hacharifin lehispashel maher, which are, if you like, quick. That's really the vigorous to ripen early. That's what it refers to. Those produce that basically ripens quickly. It says Rashi, hu chatzi shvat v'adar v'chatzi nisan, and it's the period which begins at Tu B'Shvat through Adar and half. And he says here half of Nisan. That's how he measures that period in the year of what choref is. Where does that word come from? By the way, does anyone want me to share the sources on the screen? I'm happy to do so if it's easier. So, you okay with it? Okay, right. If anyone else wants me to, then please do let me know. So we're at the top of the second sheet, source 5. There is a pasuk in the book of Eov, and we're going to, one of the things that I think Rav Hirsch has had a tremendous talent for is almost encyclopedic knowledge of Tanakh. So he's able to draw, and you see this all the way through his commentaries, whether it's on the Torah, whether it's on the Yom Tovim, he's able to draw on psukim, which many of us have hardly heard of, right? And he's able to bring them together to shine lights on other areas of the Torah, which is just absolutely fascinating. So he says that he brings a pasuk in Eov, and this pasuk reads as follows: Ka'asher yisi b'mei chorfi, as I was in the days, literally, of my winter, okay, b'soid Eloka alei oholi, when the secret of God, the secret of Hashem, sheltered my tent. So what it really means, it's not winter. What it really means, if you look at Rashi says there, so Rashi, I printed Rashi here underneath the pasuk, b'mei chorfi, what does it mean chorfi here? B'mei kadmusi, it means my youth. He says, Lashon Aram, it's young. In Aramaic, you find the words young and old, right? Or early and late, really. It means early. That's what it means. So here, Eov is not talking about winter. He's talking about his youth. When I was young, when I was young. And the next Rashi tells us, what does he mean the secret of Hashem sheltered my tent, when the important people in the generation, from the word kosher, they came to my tent, to gather together, to consult, whatever it was, in the words of Hashem, but Torah, in the Torah, whatever the things they needed to calculate, various things. Did they need to make barriers, fences for the Torah, maybe specific injunctions? Eov seems to be describing here, how wonderful and an important person he was when he was young. We know that the whole book, the whole Sefer Eov, is a difficult, obviously very difficult to understand, but the whole Sefer is Eov's reflection on his own, on what has befallen him, the tragedies that he's befallen, and trying to understand and he tries to understand why has this happened. He's trying to understand why has this happened to me, and this is really him in this part of the Sefer. He's described. Just read you a little bit of context here. He's saying, and just read you the English of the surrounding psukim. If only I could be as in the earlier months, as in the days when Hashem would watch over me, when his light would shine over my head, I would walk in darkness by his light. And then he says, when I was in the days of my youth, when God's mastery was above my tent. So you see that he's reflecting on how things used to be. So what we see here is something fascinating. Usually, you would think, and maybe is the case in certainly in any other language, that winter is basically a metaphor for old age. It's the decline, right? It's the decline of everything that we have. That's what really, that's what winter stands as a straightforward metaphor for. You have the flowering of spring, you have the joy of summer. Winter is the decline, is when is unfortunately when everything's on the way out. But in Lashon HaKodesh, in Hebrew, choref is not only a metaphor for winter, but the word also denotes adolescence in terms of the idea of vigor. That's what it means. When Eov says, he's talking here, he's reflecting on the energies that he had when he was young. Yeah, when Hashem, the secret of God, sheltered my tent, I had such wonderful ideas. I had tremendous energy at that moment in time. So Rav Hirsch says like this. Let me read you a few lines. What infinite comfort lies in this perspective, he says, which refuses to be deceived by outer appearances, not looking back, but only forward. Consider not the fallen blossoms and the broken branches of the past, but only the buds and blossoms that sleep beneath the cover of winter, awaiting the ray of sunshine that will awaken them to life. Thus, winter is not regarded, he says, as the grave of a summer that is past, but as the cradle of a spring that is to come. What infinite comfort lies in this contemplation. Who then would despair, he says. And this is the way he takes it forward to understanding, as we'll see, the lives that we live. Who then would despair during the winter of Jewish life, abandoning all hope for a Jewish rebirth, simply because we still cannot as yet see the first blossoms of such hopes? He says that the joy of Tu B'Shvat is understanding that what winter is not decline. It's the promise of new birth. It's the promise of new growth. That is what winter is. In a leap year, particularly, this is true, because in a leap year, next year, for example, next year is a leap year. So in a Jewish leap year, so what happens Tu B'Shvat is incredibly early, right? It's really right, like in the middle of January, right? Even this year, it's pretty early as it is, but it gets obviously next year is probably in the middle or the second or third week in January. It's so far off, and nevertheless, from this moment in time, there's a sign for us that spring has begun. And it's a sign for us how we always have the opportunity to, if you like, be reborn, to renew ourselves. So where do we see that this comparison, if you like, is itself appropriate? So there is a very famous pasuk in Devarim, which is source 6 on the sheets, which is talking about besieging a city. And it says there, you besiege a city, it's a command, it's a mitzvah not to cut down the tree, and to wave an axe against the tree, a fruit tree, because you can consume the fruit, you have to eat it, you can't cut it down, because man is a tree of the field, is the tree a person to take part in a siege, says Rashi there. I've got down the next line here. He says, is it perhaps Shema ha'odom eitz hasoda? Is a person the tree of the field? Is the tree going to become part of the besieged city, like the city you are, the people inside the city, to be afflicted with famine, with thirst? Lama tashchisenu, why should you destroy it? But it's clear it's clear from Chazal and many others that there is this automatic connection here between mankind and a tree. Obviously has clear significance in other areas as well. So even though the literal translation is saying it's an exclamation, is the tree a person? Is the tree a person? But we also read it in the sense that ki ha'odam eitz hasoda. There is a comparison between humankind and trees themselves. And what is the depth of that? Or what is the depth of that connection? How does that work? So says Rav Hirsch like this. He says the Jewish mind, again, just reading to you some lines from his writings, the Jewish mind and the Jewish heart cannot be stirred early enough or too often by the bright thoughts of spring. These thoughts and feelings in turn are to lead to constructive action. Ki ha'odom eitz hasoda, man develops akin to the tree. The unthinking observer considers the day on which the leaves of the blossoms finally give way to the emerging fully ripened fruit as the birthday of the fruit. But a thinking person uses a phrase from the Gemara, Ozel bosa chanota, looks at the budding of the fruit, the beginning. A thinking person researches the process which leads to the first stirrings within the tree of the buds themselves. And that, he says, is the key to understanding the connection. The connection is to discover the sensitivity that we need to have to early beginnings and early thoughts in our minds, and the processes and the way we lead our lives are key to effective, and if you like, spiritual development. Understand how we grow as people. Says Rav Hirsch. Rav Hirsch brings a whole section from Eov Perek, also from Eov Perek Yudalad, Posuk Zion to Posuk Tesvov. We've got this here in source 7, and this is really a reflection, if you like. The whole Perek there is a reflection on the mortality of man, the fragility of life itself. It says like this. Again, I'm just going to read you a little bit of context here before we get to the psukim that I brought on the sheets. A man born of woman, these are the psukim in Eov, has a short lifespan and is sated with anxiety. He emerges like a blossom and is then cut down. He flees like a shadow and does not endure. You feel the echoes of Nasana Tokef, obviously, right? This idea of the fleeting dream. Do not fix, this is chapter 14, Perek Yudalad of Eov. Do you fix your eyes even upon such a being that you bring me to judgment with you? Who can produce purity from impurity? No one. The idea that why, effectively, Rashi says there, why are you judging so severely, Eov is saying, the sins of such a lowly creature? What am I? He's saying, I'm nothing. Carries on just to skip a few lines, and he gets to he compares mankind, or contrasts human life with the life of a tree. Ki yesh le'etz tikva. This is Posuk Zion. For there is hope for a tree. Im yikores v'oid yachalif. If he is cut down, if the tree is cut down, it will sprout again. V'yonakto lo sechdol, and its nourishment from the soil will never cease. Im yaskin ba'oretz shoroshoy, if its roots will age within the earth, ve'ofer yomus gizoy, the stem would die in the dust. Me'reach ma'im yifrach, just from the scent of water, it puts forth blossoms. The tree is able to regrow from the smallest thing, from the smallest amount of nourishment. V'oso kotzir kamoinota, and it yields produce as if it had been recently planted. V'gever, now look at the contrast. V'gever yomus v'yechelosh, and man would die because of weakness. V'yigva odom v'ayon, if a man dies, does he no longer exist? Does that mean he no longer exists? Ozlu mayim mini yom, water must disappear from the ocean. V'nor yecherav v'yovesh, when a stream ceases to flow and remains dry. V'ish shochav v'lo yokum, once a man lies down, he does not arise. Ad bilti shomayim lo yokitzu, till the heavens vanish, they will not awake. V'lo ye'eru mishnosom, Rav Hirsch understands there's a question, will they never awaken from their sleep? Mi etein b'shol tatzpineni, oh, conceal me in the grave. Tastireni ad shuv apcho, preserve me there until your anger abates. Toshes lichoik v'siskareni, even there you would set a goal for me and you would remember me. Im yomas gever hayichyeh, when a man dies, can he regain life? Kol yemei tzavoi ayachel, during all the days of my struggle, I continue to hope. Ad boi chalifosi, till the day of my rejuvenation comes. Tikra va'anuchia eneka, you call me and I will answer you. Lemasi odecha tichsof, because you yearn for your creations. What is Eov saying here? He's saying that when it comes to the way we look at life so often, we feel as if there's nothing there. There's no more growth. There's nothing else to do. The reflection on life as if it's gone, as if it's fallen. But the inspiration from the tree is the tree looks like that too. The tree during winter looks like it's completely dead, and yet it can regrow. Says Rav Hirsch, let me read you again some more of his beautiful words here. A powerful lesson emerges from this truth, from the announcement of spring, from the lips of the trees still covered by the snow-white shroud of winter. In other words, Tu B'Shvat. Men are bent by sorrow, bent by pain and grief. They had harbored beautiful dreams of their future, proudly wearing the crown of their efforts, intoxicated with the unlimited power of their might and deeds. But a violent force robbed them of their fruits, and the storms of life smashed their flourishing hope and joy, destroyed the glitter of their society, broke the halo of their power and might, and left them poor and defenseless. That's so often, unfortunately, what life can be like. The storms of life still shake their existence and rob them of their fleeting accumulation of wealth, riches, and precious metals. The crown of their pride was broken and they were left naked and poor. Not a single blossom is within sight. No greenery heralds the coming of a new future. They fail to look within themselves, to realize the source from which all help emanates and where hope, strength, and life blossom. On Chamisha Osa, says Rav Hirsch, on the 15th, on the birthday of spring in the midst of winter, he says, what we need to do, he says, leave your homes, shaken by winter's storms and tempests. Behold the trees on the day of their birthday and recall the beauty and harmony of their appearance. He's almost challenging us to walk outside on Tu B'Shvat itself and look at the trees and remember what they look like in the summer, decorated with fruits and crowns of leaves, branches and twigs. Winter robbed them of their fruit and colorful leaves. The storms and cold broke branch after branch, twig after twig, leaving the trees covered with shrouds of ice and snow, yet lashed by the storms and fury of the season. They celebrate today their silent inner rebirth in defiance of nature's onslaughts. What did the trees lose, or what were they deprived? It says the fruits of which they were robbed would eventually have fallen anyway. The leaves which they lost had already withered. The twigs and branches broken, the storms were already dry. They were brittle, they were lifeless, but the inner core remained alive and fresh, and they will always weather the storm, as our people will survive the nocturnal terrors of our historic night. He says that is the message for the Jewish people as a whole of the regrowth of Tu B'Shvat and why it's specifically in the middle of the winter. And he takes it further in the sense of the prophecy, prophetic aspect, the nevuah for the future. If you look at source 8, Pasuk in Yeshayahu, it says, "V'rabahu azuva b'kerev ha'aretz." However disconsolate the abandonment on earth can appear, v'od ba Assyria, the Assyria, the 10th dedicated to Hashem, will remain. V'shava v'hoya solavoya, and even if may this be destroyed again and again, even though as a people we suffer again and again and again, even though v'shava v'hoya solavoya, ka'alo v'cha'alon, ka'elo v'cha'alon, like the oak and the beech trees, asher b'shaleches, that even though they lose whilst they lose their leaves, they lose their twigs, they lose everything, nevertheless, matzeves bom. That means their stem is still retained. The stem is always there, even when they lose the leaves. Zera kodesh matzavto, so his stem remains for the future sanctuary. And the Radak there says, he explains, I've got it here on the bottom of the second page. He says that even though it looks like he compares, the Novi is comparing here, Yeshayahu is comparing the Jewish people to the oak and the beech tree. Shiashiru aleim bizman hachoref. They lose their leaves in the winter, beginning of the second line. The Yarashim Yiveshim, they look like they're completely dry. V'zeu perish b'shaleches, perish b'hashlich aleim, means when they cast off their leaves. Av b'chein matzeres bom, but the stem is still there. Perish ha'emdo, ki omda lachosom bohem. The moisture remains, the sap remains. Aval b'shen yirein yiveshim, when they look dry. Ki b'mei Nisan yeshuvav yifrochoy ha'olem. Because we know that when it comes to Nisan, they will once again blossom. Kain zera kodesh matzav tom, ki aval b'shi yigalu kulom. So too, the stem remains for the future sanctuary of the Jewish people. Even though they're exiled, kulam, all of them, lo tachshvu ki chalu b'golos. Don't think they're going to be finished in exile. V'lo yashuvu la'aretz, and return to their land. Ki od yifrachu v'yitzmachu v'yashuvu la'aretz. They will flower once again. They will return to their land. I feel like, for me personally, just learning through these ideas of Rav Hirsch, apart from the way the way it helps us understand why what Shevat is and what Tu B'Shvat is and how powerful and important it is to us in our minds as a people. To my mind also, it sort of reveals the depth of beauty that there is within Nach and the harder parts of Nach, right? You look at the words of Yeshayahu, the words of Eov, there is so much there. There is so much there in terms of depth. It's almost like if only we had time to learn Nach properly in terms of these, the beauty of these psukim. But there is another critical aspect to this idea of what Tu B'Shvat means, because although this we've primarily focused so far really on the almost like the global picture, right? So it's about the Jewish people as a whole. That's certainly the way what it looks like in terms of the description that's given in Eov and Sefer Eov, or at least how Rav Hirsch is understanding it. That we need to look at mankind as a whole. Look, all the global situation of the Jewish people, there will always be regrowth again, even when times seem so dark. But there is another aspect to this, which goes to the very heart of what human nature is. Rav Shlomo Wolber, he has a piece in Sefer Alei Shur that he calls Yemei Ha'ava v'Yemei Hasina, the days of love and the days of hatred, literally, v'Hayirsh, and giving up hope. And he talks about the fact that anyone who is a keen observer of human nature knows that it is human nature, and particularly in areas of spiritual striving and spiritual growth, to go through up periods and down periods. It's just the nature of life. Everyone goes through periods of time, sometimes even moments on the same day, when they feel much more connected and they feel less connected. That is the nature of what life is like. The question is how to deal with that and those natural cycles of spirituality in life, and how to make sure that the times when we feel less connected don't damage the times when we feel more connected. In other words, how do you remain connected even when you feel less connected? If that makes sense. If I'm phrasing it clearly enough. And he brings there a very, very profound excerpt from, this is Rav Wolber brings this, it's source 9 on the 3rd page, from a sefer called Sefer HaYosha, which is attributed to Rabbeinu Tam. It's not entirely clear who wrote the Sefer HaYosha. It's attributed to Rabbeinu Tam, who was one of the great early Rishonim, a few generations after Rashi. He and in this sefer, so you're talking about the sort of 11th, 12th century, 11th century thereabouts, probably 12 more, yeah. And he says like this: Kol maschel asos shum ma'aseh. Anyone who begins any action in life, im yelo b'ma'aseh shum hano. He says if there's any benefit there in that action to oneself, tikonis bo hatayva, the desire will enter that frame of mind, that action. Ki kein kol ma'aseh sheyesh bo shum hano, tikonis b'libo ha'avo rishona. Anything where a person gets a benefit from, so the connection to it, the feeling for it, the love aspect for it comes in first. But afterwards, the passion for it will fade, the positive act that one is doing, and one will lead to a situation he calls it hatred. It means, if you like, being detached and apart from it. And that will fade as well. And so too, it always goes in cycles like this. One goes away and the second one comes. They each take turns. But if the person who is striving to achieve greatness, to achieve the right things, if the benefit that one is getting, one appreciates why it's worthwhile staying the course, the yeshlo seichel, and he's got intelligence, what happens is that the high points, right, the periods that he calls ava, they last for longer, and the days that he calls sinna, they are limited. If he doesn't have that intelligence, but he doesn't have that great, if you like, affinity for his service in a spiritual sense. So then the problem is he's got that enjoyment, that connection on one side, but he's got confusion on another. Then if a person doesn't apply their seichel, what happens is it goes in the reverse. And he's only got a few days of the ups, right? And many more days, unfortunately, of the downs, of the lack of connection. And when they exchange, the cycle continues many times, the ups and the downs, the connection and the disassociation or the lack of connection. If a person gets something that renews his connection, then he will increase. The connection itself will increase. The love for it will increase. But if he mischadshu devarim roim, negative things can work the same way, and tosef hasina, and the lack of connection, the lack of attachment can increase as well. If there's nothing renewed at all, yushneim shovim, they'll both be equal until his intelligence can come and go one way or the other. And he says like this: now that we've revealed, he says, this secret of the inevitability of the ups and downs, the times of spiritual connection and the times of feeling spiritual separation in that sense. And this can be expressed in so many different ways. It can be expressed in terms of the connection we feel to davening, for example, right? Some days may feel very connected, and other days not at all. And he's saying that's normal. That's what life is like. It might be that we'll feel sometimes a tremendous a connection to Shabbos or any other mitzvah, and other times we don't feel it as much. But he says, now that you know about this, if you're aware of the ups and downs, we'll say like this: someone who wants to work on themselves, wants to grow, wants to strive in life, needs to recognize at the beginning of their journey in spirituality, that they're always battling between them, the love and the hatred. Sometimes one wins, sometimes the other. He shouldn't worry at the beginning of those stages of spiritual growth if sometimes it's difficult. He doesn't feel that connection. Because that's how it works at the beginning. It gets to a certain point, and then it fades away. And then it goes again and renews itself. Better times will come. And afterwards, if the weakness there's weakness to the love and the detachment is stronger, when he feels those down points, he won't give up. The person who's involved will not give up on this. He or she will know that at the end of the day, that there will come a time, it will come soon. The renewal will come again. It might be next week. It might be the week after. It might be a month's time, but it will come again. The one who's intelligent needs to think, to seek. When one feels that lack of connection, one feels in one's spiritual growth as if it's the time of winter. The key, he says, is don't leave all activity alone. He says, what person must not do is say, I'm going to leave everything. I'm going to get to it later. When I feel more of a connection, that's when I'll renew all the things I want to do. I'll renew the mitzvahs I do. I'll renew the davening I do once I feel more of a connection. Because if a person leaves everything, then he'll lose it. If a person can hold on to it just a little bit, lo yovad, it won't be lost. And that really also is how I think you bring the power of Hirsch. Doesn't talk about this, but I think what I think you do with this is you take the power of Hirsch's idea of noticing the budding of spring in the middle of winter, that power of spring and winter, as we titled the whole Shiur, to bring it onto a personal human level. Because Tu B'Shvat represents the fact that life itself is always a cycle, right? That's how life is. Life is, we are built in that way. We are built to go through periods in our lives that are stronger and that are weaker, that we feel more of a connection and that we feel less of a connection. That is normal. That is how we live. And anyone who thinks that's not normal, or anyone who gives the impression, right, that they always feel on that level, they're always on cloud 9 in ruchnius, in their spiritual growth, you know that it's just a facade. And it may be that whenever they're in public, they look like that. Okay, great. It's a great show. Human beings are not like that, right? Because human beings go through times which are harder and go through times which are easier, and the connection there is easier. Of course, there may be some incredibly holy spiritual individuals who may always feel that, but the human nature is to go through these cycles. Tu B'Shvat appears in the middle of the depths of winter. But by appearing then, and by us having so much focus on it, tells us that even in the down points in life, even in the cold winter time of life, the potential for growth is always there. And therefore the need to nourish it, to keep that connection, is so, so important. The message in that last line is so powerful. If a person says, I'll leave it entirely now, I'll wait till spring, I'll wait till I see the blossoms, you won't get there. You'll lose much more. But if a person says, I'll hold on to it as much as I can in the winter, I'll keep my connection as strong as I can, what will happen is when the spring comes, the growth will be possible. And that's the final source, pasuk from Shir HaShirim, where we have this real reflection on the end of winter, the real spring, the Nisan itself. Ki enei stav ovar. Stav, although we translate, modern Hebrew translate as autumn, it's really technically another name for winter. There's a confusion about whether the stav originally meant winter. Either way, here we can translate this winter, certainly that's how Rav Hirsch does. Ki enei stav ovar, the winter is past, hageshem chalaf halach lo. The rain is over and it's gone. Hanitzonim niru ba'oretz. The flowers appear on the earth. Eis hazomir higia. The time for singing has come. V'kol haTorah nishma ba'artzeinu. And the voice of the dove, the turtle dove, is heard in our land. Those beautiful words from Shir HaShirim. That vision is what we hold on to in the middle of winter, in the middle of Shvat. I think that this is so particularly relevant, this whole theme, to my mind anyway, to this year of all years. Because Shvat is always, this period of time of the year is always difficult for people. It's just the nature of the human beings. Winter is always harder. Our moods are lower in winter. It's a difficult time of the year. It's harder to get out and everything else. This year, this is multiplied many, many times more, right? Because of the situation that we're in, generally not being able to get out normally and everything else we'd like to try and do. The message of Shvat is hold on to that bud, the tiny bud that begins to appear, that's not even seen yet, the trees beginning to stir when you get to Tu B'Shvat. That power has the power to hold on to that connection, to keep the connection strong however we can during the winter time, has the power to make sure that when we do get to the spring, when Nisan rolls around, and hopefully by then the news will also improve as well by the time we get into Nisan. You know, I can't be the only one thinking, you know, that there must be some sinking, hopefully here in the way the cycle of the year works, and hopefully the the positive news for all of us, which we hope for. You know, if we hold on to that during the time of winter, then we feel the power of spring and winter. Then when spring really does arrive, it will mean so much more for us, and our connection will be so much stronger. Thank you all very much for joining, for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. Any questions, or we're okay? Everyone okay?
Is there a connection between Harif and Choref?
One second, I can't hear. Let me just, I think it's my fault. Yeah, I can hear you now. Sorry, Chama, go on.
Is there a connection between Choref and Harif? Like, you know, something is like, I don't know, spicy, sharp, like adolescent.
Yeah, I think there is. I definitely think there is. Firstly, as you know, the klal in Hebrew is everything's connected, right? If the word is the same, even when you think there's no connection, there usually is one, right? So absolutely. You know, this idea that certainly as Rav Hirsch understands it, the days of my bimei chorfi, the days of my youth, it's about energy. It's about energy. It's the same thing. It's charif, it's sharp. I think absolutely it's the same. But it's a beautiful thing that you can take a word which really should mean, like the winter would symbolize old age. We twist it on its head. It really means youth. The whole of winter means youth because of spring. It's an incredibly positive way of thinking. Yeah, thank you. Okay, any other?
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
Great pleasure. Great pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Chodesh Tov. Have a good month. Happy, healthy month. All right.
Thank you.
Bye.